topic. We've been talking about it for quite some time, and it has come to the forefront. And I'm so glad to have this panel as my guest in light of the last, let's just say, 25 days or so with the recent conviction of Rkelly, last year convicted on 9 counts, sentenced to 30 years in prison on federal racketeering and sex trafficking charges. In addition to that, prosecutors asked for 25 years. His defense team asked for less than 10. He was sentenced to 30. Chances are he will do all 30. Just this week, the 1970s is when this incident is alleged to be happening. For those who are hearing it for the very first time, a legendary boxer, George Foreman, is on his way to court. Allegations against him, sexual assault that were alleged against him in the 1970s, more than 45 years ago. Two women who started in January asking for $12.5 million in January from the boxer, now we know endorser, influencer, and the like. And it was his legal team this week that sent out the press releases to say, this is what's happening. They believe they're being extorted. In George Foreman's words, that he said, I fought to have a great reputation and I'm going to fight to keep it. He would not be in a situation where he's going to be forced to be extorted. So they're going into court, which takes me to tried twice. Hung jury, first time, second time. Mr. Bill Cosby was convicted and sent to SCI Phoenix, was released on January 30th, 2021. After serving time at SCI Phoenix in the state of Pennsylvania. And it was literally on June 30th, he celebrated 1 year after the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court overturned that. I'm going to start with this question. And this is one of the questions that I had amongst colleagues as well. And we're having it in the barbershops and beauty salons and front porches around the country. Are black celebrity men in particular with money, we in a day, particularly past hashtag Me Too, being accused of some type of sexual assault that goes back as far as 25 years? This one is going to be, I want you to be mindful as well, because it's a lot of information to cover. But we have Rkelly, Mr. Cosby, and now George Foreman going into the courtroom. Andrew, you represented, and still do, represent Bill Cosby. Do you think that black celebrity men are under attack?
Look, when the accusations and allegations was first waged against Mr. Cosby in 2014, in my first interview, I said this is assassination on black men who are wealthy and successful in America. Mr. Cosby became the litmus test, tried, true, and tested on how to create a formula to destroy the legacy of a successful, wealthy black man in America with no evidence and proof. Now we're seeing that with George Foreman. Also, I did work behind the scenes with Rkelly's team for over 5 years with attorney Wyatt Shalabi. He reached out to me, and the same thing I tried to tell Robert through his attorneys and giving them advice, getting them on the media to tell their story, Wyatt, is that, these people, Rkelly, if you look at him, a documentary brought charges against him. Now, I've never seen in the Constitution where they say, hey, you have to show forth a documentary and then we'll bring criminal charges against you. It all started with Mr. Cosby. And we tried to warn in so many ways through interviews. And I definitely said, hey, look, this is not the end. He is the beginning of coming after so many black men who are wealthy, who wants to own the rights to who they are. When you become too successful in America and you slip through the cracks as a black man, George Foreman with the George Foreman grill, everybody has one. Everybody bought one. Then people get to say, I want something from this person, and this person didn't give my career a start. And you look at now these look back laws that are very, very dangerous. And I think this case is in California with Foreman. And these women are claiming that their father worked for Foreman and they were afraid to say anything, and they were minors. And this look back law now gives any person the opportunity, if they were a minor, to come forward and say something happened with no evidence and proof. We saw it. All women came into a courtroom with only pictures, showing pictures of them with Mr. Cosby, like pictures of them. Like he would meet them in a club somewhere and take a picture. See, I was with him. One of the alleged accusers, she had a shrine on her wall of Mr. Cosby for the second trial that he was found guilty in. And they said, why did you keep the pictures? Well, they were memories. Well, why did you get on a plane and travel from St. Louis and follow him to each show? Because I was afraid for my life, and I got on a plane so he could rape me. I had no choice. You know, they don't have to have any proof now. It's all about women don't lie, and we know that's a lie.
All
And
right.
so
Let's.
it's going to keep going. We see it now with Snoop Dogg, Chris Brown. You see it with Trey Songz now. And one of the problems that we had, they said, well, don't say anything. Our attorney, our former counsel, Marty Singer, who represents the Kardashians, Tom Cruise, all of the heavy hitters in LA, he made a comment and called these stories fantastical stories. And he was sued for defamation. And Mr. Cosby never said a word, didn't even know his attorney made that statement, and they sued Mr. Cosby for defamation. I think now we have to start speaking up and speaking out.
All right. A comment. I'll start with you, Tracy.
Frankie, in terms of black men being under assault, I think that, let me start by saying this. I think that no person, man or woman, should be subjected to sexual advances of another person that they do not consent to. Absolutely. However, there is a huge difference between rape and regret. Definitely, just let me say it again. Big difference between rape and regret. So there are some instances, particularly in the case with Mr. Cosby. In those cases, these were adult women who, according to, I wasn't there, but according to, some of the news reports that I saw, went to his room at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. They consented to ingesting pills or other drugs that were given to them at the time. Listen, I'm just going to tell you that I ain't always been no saint, and I ain't one today. However, there are just some things that I recognize what it is. With all due respect to women everywhere, no does mean no. However, no, when I get that call at 2:30 in the morning, I know what's up. And so did they. There's a difference between rape and regret, and then after the fact, you regret that maybe you didn't get what you wanted out of it. So now I'm going to claim rape. No, I don't necessarily buy that. In the case of Rkelly, though, the difference I think with Rkelly, number one, let me say that in the case with Rkelly, Mr. Kelly deserved every day that he was sentenced to. He absolutely did. Because of the nature of the offenses and the age of the victim. The thing that surprises me and puzzles me the most with Rkelly is what are the agreements that they had with the other people. We have crimes called aiding and abetting in every state across the country. He didn't do this by himself. People helped him get these underage children there. I'm looking at the parents, and we're going back to the other conversation about parent accountability. Where were the parents? What kind of agreement did the state have? That the prosecutors have with these parents, that these parents were not prosecuted as well because they aided and abetted Rkelly, and they sold their children to Rkelly. See, because my 15, 16-year-old ain't going nowhere. Being locked in nowhere where I can't see her, and if I can't be there, it's just not happening. So there's a difference between, again, like I said, rape and regret. I think there's a difference between Mr. Cosby's case and the case with Rkelly because of the ages of the alleged victims in these cases. And with respect to, George Foreman, Mr. Andrew absolutely alluded to, you can go back forever. And that's what's happening right now. Generally, when it comes to an adult, when the victim of a sexual assault is an adult, in Pennsylvania, for sure, the statute of limitations, Shaka, was it 10, 12 years
12.
when it's sexual assault? It's 12 years when the victim is an adult. So a victim, an adult victim, has 12 years to seek prosecution for an act that's committed against them. However, there is no such limitation on time when the assault occurs while the victim is still a minor. And so it leaves open floodgates for people. But I think that George Foreman's team was very smart in that they brought it to the forefront. Listen, they're just trying to get money. You get ahead of it. I'm not going to let y'all expose me that way. I'm going to expose myself. I'm going on the offense. I'm going to handle this matter by exposing you. So,
All right, Shaka.
So with these look back laws, as Andrew referred to, they were instituted and used very heavily, very heavily. They were a major piece of ammunition that prosecutors used when dealing with like the archdiocese and the Catholic priests, etc. Right? That is one area where you saw them being used, and I think there was generally, at least amongst the Black community, a consensus that was appropriate because of the kind of things we were hearing from members of the clergy and the kind of devastation we were hearing that it caused with their victims through the years. But those same look back laws, and hence, this is why I was talking about the slippery slope, Andrew, right? Because once you have a buy-in, once you have a universal buy-in from the majority, you don't need all, but from the majority of a particular community, the government usually takes that and they run with it. They extend it. They're always stretching the rubber band. Like, what you give them is never enough, right? My grandmother's old saying, you give them an inch, they will take the field. They'll take the whole field if you give them an inch. And so while everybody bought into that, now they start using the look back laws in a different way, not as a shield, but a sword. The issue of Black men. The three that were highlighted on this particular show this morning are very dissimilarly situated. They are not in the same positions at all. Some of them can be qualified perhaps as victims themselves, and others, I think there's a community buy-in that there are in fact perpetrators to some extent. So they're not in the same posture, the three that we're talking about. I will say this though, it has become, and I'm just going to say it because I'm thinking it. It has become vogue to be a victim, right? It has just become very vogue and chic to be a victim, quite frankly. And some people may say, "Wow, that's pretty insensitive," but it's not. Because I'm speaking about the kind of people who will rip the scar off of they'll rip the scar tissue over their own wounds for $1. For some publicity, to be talked about, to be relevant again. And so when you whore yourself out that way, okay, it's difficult for me to give you the same, I can't deal with you with white gloves on the same way I would do a different kind of victim. Say a victim of child rape at the hands of a priest. That victim and someone who 30 years later says, I was in a nightclub and I woke up next to a celebrity. I don't know what happened. He must have taken advantage of me and I won $12 million. Like, you don't get the same, level of sentiment from me. So I do think, though, to your point, and I'll say it straight away now, I do think there is an attack on, I think, celebrities at large, quite frankly. Yes, Black celebrities are, I think, on that list, but I don't think it's an exhaustive list, right? I think they are attacking anyone with means, anyone who has the ability to pay, and anyone who, by hitching my caboose to your train in this particular way, can make me relevant again, or make me relevant for the first time, quite frankly. And I want to say this, and they're given platforms. These victims are then given platforms to become spokespeople, to have shows, to have record deals, to have all sorts of things. So it's a windfall. It's a Christmas under the tree.
Yeah, and
look,
I just want to say, and Andrew, and I want to say as well, because and especially when you are a high-profile individual, even Shaka, to your point, across ethnic, racial lines, this is a financial issue or grab, which unfortunately for people who have been assaulted, where there are high-profile people, because there are high-profile people who have assaulted people. and
Yes.
when we muddy the water behind those people I believe that you are referencing. And so we do have to be careful about that. However, and Andrew, you were getting ready to start that one of the conversations we have all the time, and I've talked about it on my radio show. How many times when a person knows that they're a high profile person, that they need to walk even softer because they're a high profile person. Now, to the net of what we're talking about here, in each of these cases, with the exception of Rkelly, and even in Rkelly, we're going back 15, 20 years.
Right.
But in
Right.
the case of George Foreman and Mr. Cosby, we're going back 25 and
40,
30
40,
years.
50 years, 40, 50 years.
But
And
that
look,
and there was a different climate then than there is now. But that you are a target because you are a high profile individual.
it was a different era at that time in the 60s and 70s. You know, Cosby, Sammy Davis Jr., the Rat Pack, all of those guys uh, walked around like regular guys. You knew when they came in the city where their hangout spots were, where restaurants. They didn't have entourages, okay. They didn't have security, okay. Their
But they were
numbers were
high profile.
listed.
But we knew
Yeah,
they were high profile,
but
and
we knew they was
they
high
were not the
profile.
average Joe, though, right?
But we knew that. But the numbers were listed in phone books. Okay, had a tendency, not knowing what the future held for them with social media and what's happening today that we see. They had a tendency to be too regular. They really did. And when you have a tendency to be regular, you set yourself up to not just be used, but misused by people. And so now we're seeing where they accuse blacks of playing the race card. Now you have women playing the victim card now. And they're abusing the victim card for true victims of sexual assault, because sexual assault does happen to women, many women, and boys and men as well. Boys and men just don't talk about it. In this past civil trial that we had in California, I was so amazed during voir dire of how many men and young men raised their hand and said, I can't be a part of this because I was molested or sexually assaulted. I've never
Mm-hmm.
seen that before. Who they
Mm-hmm.
were open, and the judge specifically said to these people, I don't want to hear your story, but they just felt the need to tell their story,
All right,
of what
Andrew,
happened to
and
them. So
let me
I,
say this because in this forum, and I've interviewed you on a number of forums, and for the people who are watching, I just want to go back to something because I don't want people to leave this show not thinking that we had this part of the conversation and giving you an opportunity to respond. We know that Mr. Cosby in the second trial was found guilty. He was incarcerated in SEI Phoenix in Pennsylvania, so he was found guilty in the second trial. And so, what I'm hearing people watching this for the first time saying, are you suggesting that Mr. Cosby did nothing? Right? Are you saying that that nothing that he had been accused of or prosecuted for, eventually in the second trial found guilty? Are you suggesting that he did nothing illegal or wrong with any of the accusers that he was involved in that put him in prison for nearly 2 years? Let me go to you to respond to that question.
he did
Would
nothing
you want
illegal.
a PR person, Andrew? You want a
Huh?
PR man right now, or you got it? You want a PR person, or you got it?
No, I got this. I got this.
Okay.
He did nothing illegal. Mr. Cosby, if you go back and read his deposition, he talked about a culture in time. They took excerpts from the deposition to say he gave women uh, quaaludes without their knowledge. Quaaludes, if you go look at the history of quaaludes, they were called disco biscuits. Quaaludes didn't cause paralysis, didn't cause you to not know who and where you were. So Mr. Cosby did nothing illegal. These were women who were looking for opportunities. Yes, was he a serial cheater? Yes. But that comes with the entertainment world. He has never denied that. That was worked out between and discussed behind closed doors between him and Mrs. Cosby. She was very aware of that, and they worked through it, and that's between the husband and wife. But did he rape and drug women? No. This is a man who was on Nixon's enemies list. The FBI watched him every day. He was number 126. And you mean to tell me a black man in the 60s and 70s was raping and drugging white women? No, it didn't happen. He has denied all of those allegations. But I tell people all the time, it was a TV show, The Talk. Sharon Osbourne made the comment. He admitted that he gave women drugs and he drugged them without their knowledge. I sent a message to Sharon and I read the deposition. I sent her an email and I sent her a copy of the deposition where he specifically said, did you give women Quaaludes? Yes, I did. Did you give women drugs and Quaaludes without their knowledge? No, I didn't. One of the accusers, Teresa Saraganese, was deposed, who's a former model. And she specifically stated in her deposition, yes, he was on stage. Soon as he got off stage, I asked him for 2 Quaaludes. He gave them to me, and we got in his Rolls Royce and went somewhere and had sex. So people don't take the time to read anything. They look at the headline, and look, the media did their job with Bill Cosby. They did their job. They did a great job. Our goal and my goal was always to put the truth and the facts out. And that's what we were able to do. But I said, go read the deposition, go read the trial transcript. That deposition was never supposed to be used. Everybody said, well, why did he settle out of court? I explained why. Mr. Cosby, if you remember,
if you can give me this, Andrew, and as about 2 minutes, go.
I want to give it to you really quick. Mr. Cosby, 20 years ago, his son was murdered in Los Angeles, shot in the head, caught a flat tire, shot in the head. Then months later, he was being extorted by Autumn Jackson, Sean Thompson's mother, for $40 million, saying that Mr. Cosby was her father. So, Mr. Cosby warned Sean to talk to her daughter. He even went and took a DNA test, and the young lady refused to go and get tested herself. And the FBI showed up at a coffee shop. His attorney, Jack Schmidt, wore a wire. So in 2005, when Andrea Constand became upset that Mr. Cosby stopped taking her calls and stood her and her mother up and her family at a comedy show in Canada, he was supposed to have dinner. Then she sat in the audience and cried and said, I better tell you, he did something to me. No, this was all because he settled out because he didn't want to deal with any more issues. Had just lost his son, being extorted. So he decided to settle out. But we saw what happened. Somebody took a deposition he gave. He was forced to go to civil court, settle out, and then they used it against him. However, Mr. Cosby is innocent. He was found, we always like to say, and I always remind people, this guy was found not guilty by the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court. We won 2 victories with the United States Supreme Court. Kathleen McGee case was thrown out, who was Sammy Davis Jr.'s girlfriend, mistress, when she filed with the United States Supreme Court, and the right of certiorari that still filed to try to get the ruling with the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court overturned. So, look, we've seen this story before. I just pray that George Foreman attorneys fight this vigorously and expose these women. That's what it's all about. You have to expose them for who and what they are.
All right, Tracy. If I may, just to follow up on that, and I want to correct you, Andrew, with all due respect, I understand what your job is here and what your role is in this case with Mr. Cosby. However, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court did not find him innocent. What the Supreme Court did in Pennsylvania was they issued a ruling that his prosecution was unlawful because of the agreement that he reached with the prosecutor.
That's innocence for us, Attorney Burns, and that's innocent for America. So that was vacated. It was vacated because his constitutional rights was violated, and the case should have never moved forward. So that's innocent for us.
The case should have never moved forward. However, the court did not say that he didn't do those things.
The judge said he should not have been prosecuted. Chief Justice Behr said that it was a reprehensible bait and switch of his constitutional rights, and that's a direct
absolutely. And
so and that was innocence. That's innocence for us.
I hear you, but it ain't.
Take your wins where you can, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, trust me, we do it.
That's innocence for us. So
that's our business. Hey. We do it. However,
Yeah.
again, the court didn't say he didn't do it. The court didn't say he was innocent. What they said was his prosecution was unlawful. And Frankie, even back when this was happening, we had conversations on more than one Sunday about it on the show. Because at the essence of that prosecution was an agreement that he had with the prosecutor back then, that what he said in that deposition, that he would never, that those statements would never be used against him in any kind of criminal prosecution. And let us be mindful is that Andrea Constant, she agreed to it back then. She absolutely agreed to it because she had the ability to seek criminal charges against him at that time and did not follow that suit because what she wanted was the monetary gain. Same thing with the George Foreman accusers. Because there's no statute of limitations with respect to the sexual assaults in California, they have the ability to have George criminally prosecuted, but that's not the route they chose to go. They actually decided, you know what, we want $25 million because they want $12.5 million each from George. So they're looking again for their monetary gain, and we have to be mindful of that.
And it's because the person, I'm being the angel's advocate. And so, are you saying, Attorney Burns, because in a case like this, and I'll try and do as much legalese and Andrew, with your background, that when a person says, at this point, 45 years later, I've done the necessary healing I needed to do, being the angel's advocate. So at least I should get some kind of monetary. The fact that a person would go after an individual monetarily and not criminally, they're less believable.
Frankie, if I'm that true victim and I'm hurting, he hurt my life. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Get him locked up.
When you have the choice to do both. There are some instances when you don't have the choice.
Right.
And so I think when you have the choice to do both and you choose, because one is complete retribution for what you've done. That's what we think a victim would want. Another one is financial recompense when usually that other avenue has been disavowed from you. They're both still available under California law.
You can do both at the same time. One is not predicated on the other.
Not at all.
Well, look in California.
Let me let Shaka finish, and then because I think it's going to speak to what. No, and Andrew, I think it's going to speak to what you're getting ready to say relative to recent. So Shaka, finish your point, and then Andrew, I think you can answer.
A lot of times, and again. Sidebar asterisk, there are true victims. Let me just be clear. But when people are attempting to get a civil judgment out of this, a lot of times they will allow the criminal process to do the work for them. So they'll let things go the criminal route because you have prosecutors, unlike civil attorneys, that you don't have to pay. All you have to do is make an allegation. You wage war, and then you can sit back and allow those criminal prosecutors to do the work for you. They'll do the investigation. They'll do all of that on the taxpayer's dime, right? They'll bring you to court. They'll create a record. They'll have hearings. All of that is on our tax dollar. When that is done, you have a monument of evidence now to get a civil case going. Right?
Absolutely.
And sometimes once you've waged that criminal war, now you have a self-made bargaining tool. You're facing this, but we're going to file judgment on this, and now you can wheel and deal and negotiate on the civil matter, all predicated on the usage of the criminal justice system.
Frankie, criminal prosecution makes the road to the money much easier.
Right. And that's what these women, and I go back to Cosby, you had 60 women to come forward who had an opportunity before any statute expired to bring criminal charges against him. And so he did these horrible things and horrific things to them. It never was about that. It was all about the greenback, the dollar, the almighty dollar. In this last case we just got of, and people want to say, well, no, Red wants to say it wasn't a victory for us. Yes, it was. Mr. Cosby the jury only awarded her $500,000, Judy Huff. But we got no punitive damages. If he had been,
let me let you. And Andrew, I want you, because you started talking about that. You need to give the front end of that, because that was the most recent trial in California.
We just got out.
If you can give it to me quickly, and the jury
we just got a civil trial with Judith Huff versus Bill Cosby. This case has been going on for 7 years. Gloria Allred represented Ms. Huff, who claims that Mr. Cosby invited her to the Playboy Mansion and he forced her to masturbate him at the Playboy Mansion. All she had was pictures. Well, the case was given a permanent stay because of his conviction. And then August of last year, Allred became upset because the conviction was overturned. And so she said, well, I'm going to ask the judge to remove the permanent stay. We said, please go forward and do that. So we just got out of trial back in June. And the jury came back finding that Mr. Cosby did, in fact, invite a minor. The young lady, she changed her age in the 11th hour so many times. Judith Huff did, Miss Huff. But we did find that Mr. Cosby invited a minor to the Playboy Mansion. But we're only going to award her $500,000, but no punitive damages. If he had been found guilty of punitive damages that day, we would have had to write, because there was no cap, we would have had to write a check for $20 million that day. She was awarded $500,000. She has a $4 million legal bill with Gloria Allred. And she would never get to see a dime of that money because once the judge makes his final judgment, which he's refusing to do, we will appeal that $500,000.
And you're saying she'll never get the $500,000. Why?
Well, because it's going to be appealed. It's going to be held up for 2 to 3 years. And if she was to get the money in 3 years and the appeal gets denied, our appeal, she has a $4 million plus legal bill.
All right.
So what I'm saying, this is all of these cases are about extortion. Gloria Allred has a system. She has a rule. She knows how to go after successful black men. Shaquille O'Neal settled with her. His agent reached out to me and said, man, tell Uncle Bill to settle. We signed an agreement with her that she could never come after Shaq again for the rest of her life.